You might already know how new laws are made in the EU and who the main players are, but not all new EU laws take on the same form. Some come in the form of a regulation and some of a directive. While both are forms of EU legislation, there are some major differences. Firstly, let's talk about EU regulations. In principle, these regulations are very similar to the national laws that countries have. Government sets a goal and defines how to achieve it. Once the law comes into effect, it is binding upon everyone within the country's borders. In case of EU laws, it has effect on all EU member states and everyone within their borders, even overruling existing national laws. An example is the regulation regarding roaming tariffs within the EU. Since 2007, it has regulated the charges that can be imposed upon you by your telecom provider, limiting your costs for using your cell phone elsewhere in the EU. Once it came into effect, it applied to everyone within the EU, including you and your provider. In line with the principle of subsidiarity, the EU should leave as much to the member states as possible. Since the binding regulations leave little room for the member states, they are not a preferred type of law. Rather, they are only used when directives are not suitable to achieve the goal. In short, such a directive describes what the goal is, just like a regulation. However, unlike a regulation, it doesn't say how it must be achieved. Each member state may decide how to achieve the set goal and what national laws are needed to do so. This gives the member states a lot more room to choose their own approach. As a result, the ways of achieving the same goal can differ among member states, with different sort of laws per country. An example of this is the Data Protection Directive of 1995. Because of varying interpretations, big differences existed between the member states when it came to the level of data protection, with countries like Austria and Germany having very strong data protection laws and countries like Ireland much less so. Here we also see the switch from directive to regulation. First, it was thought that a directive would suffice to achieve the common goal. When it turned out the directive didn't get the job done, a regulation was passed to achieve what the directive couldn't. In case of data protection, a regulation was passed in 2016. It harmonizes European data protection legislation to ensure that all of us have the same data protection regardless of the member states we or the companies are in. Besides these two forms of EU legislation, the EU uses another legal act, decisions. These, once they come into effect, are not binding for everyone within the EU, but only for those member states, companies, or individuals specifically addressed by it. Decisions are used for things such as setting standard prices for vegetables, or to decide whether or not a proposed merger of big companies is allowed. The big difference between decisions and the two other forms of EU legislation is that decisions can be adopted by the Commission on its own. So, to summarize, when new EU laws have managed to pass all obstacles, it can come in two shapes. Regulations, binding laws that apply to all EU member states and everyone within them, stating what goals to achieve and how to achieve them. And directives, laws that set out the aims only, leaving member states to decide for themselves how to achieve them and what national laws are needed. Because the EU should stay out of the business of member states as much as possible, this is the preferred form of EU legislation. Lastly, the EU also uses decisions. It applies only to those individuals or countries that are directly addressed by it, mostly used against big companies and member states. Unlike regulations and directives, decisions can be adopted by the Commission alone, without the Council and Parliament's involvement. To find out more about the other institutions, the history of the EU, and other subjects, please check out our playlists and subscribe to our channel.
Okay, hi everyone. And today's a short class. And so so I don't forget, let's go to the Cyber Campus and open up Cyber Campus and make sure I share the screen for Cyber Campus. And we go to Cyber Campus and we go to attendance, and it disconnected me, so I have to log back in, and then go to attendance and week 9, add, and smart attendance, and the number is 268. 268 is your number, and let me go back to the 268 is the number, and let me then go back to the themes that we were covering the last class, which is this important relationship of Europeanization and European identity and European liberal democracy to nationalism. And I want to always illustrate these relationships by providing real world examples, particularly as we're dealing with a once in a century, if not longer term, global crisis, which is testing governments everywhere and leadership around the planet, in the United States, in India, as we're all tragically watching, in Korea, and in the European Union. And we emphasized how that drawing from that political psychology perspective on nationalism from Kadam and Kadam, we defined nationalism. Remember, we did the exercise on defining nationalism, and we explained what fascism was, defining fascism, and we explained what fascism was, I should say, which is the association of nationalism with authoritarian values, authoritarian order values imposed, including on those sections of the population that resist with through terror and coercion. That Kadam and Kadam in that text that I showed you, that information I showed you, pointed out, remember, that typically nationalism associates with liberal values. And nationalism is a behavior pattern deriving from people's intense self-identification with the nation. And they become very emotional and strongly concerned about that in-group, their nation, and they're prone to make mistakes in their perceptions in terms of stereotyping and becoming quite emotional about these perceived threats and opportunities for the nation. So the point, again, that we've been making is that nationalism doesn't disappear, but what European Union as a peace strategy aims in Europe is to make sure that those nationalisms of the European public, if not the elite, because remember, we might talk about the elite of the European Union, and these textbooks that we are using, these are textbooks written for the elite, by the elite, for the elite. Your typical European, Italian, Greek, German is never going to read such a textbook. And but the mass of the population can be more prone to display nationalism, although it's still important at the elite level, right? Brexit would not have happened if there was not a large section of the British elite that really did not want to be in the European Union. But you find amongst the French elite, the German elite, the Italian elite, much less compared to the British elite, orientation towards nationalism. In their attitudes, but still the mass publics in Germany or France or Italy are nationalistic, as reflected, for example, in the French 2005 rejection of the Constitution Treaty of the European Union, the draft Constitution of the European Union, through a popular referendum, and there are other examples as well. But associating that nationalism, in other words, and the pride that one has as an Italian member of the public, or the German public, or the French national opinion public, is reflected by the orientation of the individual elites within those countries to understand everything we're talking about here, and understand they need, therefore, they are representatives of the nation in these European nation states. I'm not talking about Belgium. I'm not talking about smaller multi-ethnic states like Belgium. I'm talking about France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Poland, that these leaders typically are themselves perceived as the government apparatus representing the state. And the state, in the form of the government apparatus, represents the nation. And so the elites themselves attempt to display this, their pride of being an Italian, for example, through participating in this European project, and this European project establishing Europe as a global leader in various areas: climate, right? Climate and climate change reduction, and climate protection, environmental protection. That is one of the main focuses of the European Union in terms of Europe being a powerful and prestigious actor on the world stage that maybe many Italians and French and Germans might feel proud of, particularly the younger generations that are more oriented towards global welfare concerns. And so, even though, of course, this nationalism is a tricky, even at times dangerous value orientation to exploit, because elites can lose control over it, and counter elites can exploit that and take disproportionate influence and even potentially come to power in these states. I have in mind the Law and Justice Party, for example, and in Poland, and other examples as well. But I wanted to highlight this before we go back to the notes in the chapter textbook about this function of liberal nationalism. So in the context of the pandemic, because as we covered earlier, the book was published right before the pandemic began. So the book obviously is not reflecting the impact of the pandemic, but liberal nationalism was discussed briefly when we at the last class, when I had you do that poll vote on whether or not Europeanization depends upon liberal nationalism. And let me see if I can find the example I wanted to highlight here to you about that exercise was supposed to reflect, but we ran out of time. And so let me share the screen. And so we go here. And so you see there has been a big challenge to the European Union in terms of comparing the European Union with Italy, not with Italy, the European Union with the United States, with Britain, with other countries in terms of the speed of vaccinations and dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. And this highlights, this is a news report from a couple weeks ago in the New York Times about how Italy was doing relatively a mediocre pace of vaccination, and everyone is comparing everybody else in the European Union, right? That's a feature of Europeanization. It's highlighted in the chapter reading for this week, that Europeanization includes informal methods of comparison and adopting best practice, that because we're all part of this European community, that we Italians look at what the French are doing, and we should look closely what the French are doing, what the Germans are doing in terms of what we should do, evaluating what we should do, and measuring our own success or failure compared to our neighbors, our fellow Europeans. That's an aspect of Europeanization, benchmarking it's called. Who's got the best practices and policies in place that we can learn from each other? And of course, there is highlighted in the chapter reading an effort to formally institutionalize that shared practice and shared learning process called the open method of coordination. The open method of coordination. But that's just one way, or one effort that the European Union made to institutionalize this informal practice that happens not just within the European Union, but for example, comparing the European Union or with the United States or Israel or South Korea in terms of dealing with the pandemic. And so before I go on here, I wanted to show you that on a liberal level, another example of Europeanization here, which is something which is, again, a focus of the European Union in terms of the European Union claiming or to play an important role in world affairs, is on human rights, particularly gender minority rights. So this is from about a week ago, less than a week ago, highlighting how in Poland, which you read that chapter on Poland, with the Law and Justice conservative, quasi-populist authoritarian regime moving more and more in this direction, that the Law and Justice Party represents conservative Polish nationalist values as a counter elite moving against the secularized post-socialist elite that has been dominating the society since modernization under communism. That as the Law and Justice Party came into office, and the social left party, that is the post-communist party in Poland, that party disappeared, which is shocking. I mean, it really struck me when reading that chapter on Poland about how the former post-communist party, that was the Polish Socialist Party, has disappeared from the parliament. That hasn't happened, for example, in Bulgaria. The former communist party in Bulgaria, which is now the Bulgarian Socialist Party, it's still one of the dominant parties in Bulgaria, and it will remain one of the dominant parties. But Poland is the challenging actor here. But the point I wanted to highlight is how the Law and Justice Party is opposed to legalizing and institutionalizing LGBTQ rights for lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and questioning individuals in that society, which the European Union is strongly committed to, gender minority rights. And so according to a non-governmental organization, again, this notion that these non-governmental civil society actors are part of Europeanization. There's not really a strong focus on it in the textbook, although the textbook does cover to some degree, the emergence of civil society actors. But typically there's a chapter on social movements and interest groups. So I think you'll read that later in the book. But here you see a social movement, civil society actor that's not oriented towards profit. It's non-profit, human rights oriented organization throughout Europe. ILGA Europe. It doesn't say what ILGA stands for, but it's a manifestation of Europeanization, right? With NGOs emerging that are trans-European. According to a 2020 survey by ILGA Europe, an international gay rights organization, Poland now ranks as the most homophobic country in the European Union. And the point I wanted to highlight here is how these Polish people who are gay or trans are comparing their situation with people living in other European Union countries like Spain or Berlin, Germany. And that they can actually, of course, go to Spain and go to Berlin if they don't want to stay in Poland. Piotr Grabarczyk, a 31-year-old journalist, left Poland for Barcelona, Catalonia, Spain, right, with his boyfriend last July, attracted by Spain's more liberal way of life. Originally from a small town in Northern Europe, he described his childhood as one of complete loneliness and alienation. The internet was my only escape. And so when he found out that gay marriage was legal in Spain, he said that shocked him. So here you see Spain, Poland, Germany being compared nationally. And if you're a liberal nationalist, you might feel bad if you are opposed to the Law and Justice Party in Poland, if you're a secular liberal Polish citizen who wants Poland to be perceived as a progressive, modern 21st century country, you might and want to be proud of your country as a Polish nationalist, as a Polish patriot, but a liberal Polish patriot, that you will more readily compare yourself with Spain as another liberal nation, and Germany as another liberal nation. So it goes on here. As he was preparing to leave Poland, a cardboard box filled with rainbow T-shirts, leaflets, and educational books that he left outside his home in upscale gated community in Warsaw. This means wealthy community in Warsaw was defaced with the message "Burn LGBT." So upscale gated implies maybe that he is more educated. Homosexuality has long been taboo in Poland, where the Roman Catholic Church, which plays a prominent role in the country's social and political life, has worked hand in hand with the government to promote a conservative way of life. So, and another person moved to Germany, to Berlin. While she is happy to be in Berlin, she is sad that her grandmother still doesn't know about her sexual orientation. I told her I'm moving to Berlin with my flatmate. She said it feels awful to lie to my closest family. So this is being reported in the media. This is being highlighted in the struggle, the challenge to associate Polish nationalism, Polish national pride with liberal values versus the Law and Justice Party's orientation of Polish nationalism to associate it with traditional conservative values as represented, for example, by the conservative Roman Catholic Church. in Poland. You know, of course, that Poland is, you know, overwhelmingly Catholic. And of course, so that's an example of Europeanization on an informal, comparative level. And then there's another example here that we want to highlight about vaccine nationalism as a concern. So here you see that the European Union has been negatively compared to Britain, and Boris Johnson, the Conservative Party, claiming that, see, our much quicker vaccination drive, in which now half of British people have been vaccinated, shows that, rightly or wrongly, he's claiming that that legitimates and validates Britain leaving the European Union. And so, and the European institutions, in particular, the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has been criticized and blamed for the comparative slowness of the vaccine rollout. And here you see nationalists led by Mario Draghi, the former president of the European Central Bank, is considered to be a very charismatic individual. This is from a couple of weeks ago. The European Union was stumbling through the COVID-19 vaccine rollout, marred by shortages and logistical bungling in late March, when Mario Draghi took matters into his own hands. He's the new prime minister of Italy that came into office after the pandemic started. The new Italian, and after the vaccines were purchased, right? He wasn't involved in those initial negotiations. So then he becomes the new prime minister of Italy. The new Italian prime minister seized a shipment of vaccines destined for Australia, and along with them an opportunity to show that a new aggressive and potent force had arrived in the European bloc. The move shook up a Brussels leadership that seemed to be asleep at the switch. That means the Commission. Within weeks, in part from his pressing and engineering behind the scenes, the European Union had authorized even broader and harsher measures to curb exports of COVID-19 vaccines badly needed in Europe. The Australia experiment, as officials in Brussels and Italy call it, was a turning point both for Italy and Europe and Italy. And at home, Mario Draghi's vaccine gambit in March provided political red meat to an Italian population starved for vaccines and a sensitive agency, but it was calculated to improve Europe's leverage as a whole. So he's acting like a nationalist, but appearing to be a European liberal nationalist on behalf of Europe, but still acting in a nationalistic way because he's screwing over the Australians. I mean, the Australians are not getting the vaccine that they were supposed to get shipped to them. That's not a very liberal thing to do, because nationalism is inherently, ultimately not very liberal. But last week, Mr. Draghi, who is by turns droll and wonky, but always direct, kept the pressure on Brussels when it came to vaccine exports. He referred to lightweight efforts in the original contract negotiation with the pharmaceutical companies, and noted that despite its new tough rules on export bans, the European Union had yet to act. In his debut in a European meeting as Italy's Prime Minister in a European Council meeting in February, Mr. Draghi made it clear that he was not there to cheerlead. He told an economic summit, including heavy hitters like his European Central Bank successor, Christine Lagarde, to curb your enthusiasm when it came to talk about a closer fiscal union. This highlights how he had criticized Ursula von der Leyen, trying to assert Italy's leadership. So you as an Italian can feel proud of being Italian by Italy within Europe. Mario Draghi stepping up for Europe, with Italy taking the lead and stepping up for Europe to address the pandemic. You can see how nationalism is associated with liberal values in this sense. And then he backs off. He then defends Ursula von der Leyen. He thanks her. He doesn't want her to be attacked. And I think I might have covered this already at the last class, but this came up again. So Ursula von der Leyen, and you know, gender rights, as we already mentioned, gender minority rights and feminism, and feminist positions are also another strong focus of the European Union globally. That the European Union is about liberating women and women's equality in the world with men. So European Union promotes women in leadership positions, has strong quotas for female members of agencies, pressures governments to include equal representation of women in their national executives. And then we have this. So here is an episode that happened a week ago, which I don't know if it was covered, of course, in the South Korean media, but it was it was something which was kind of shocking to observers. So make sure that I get this opened up here and screen share, because when I click on the link, it goes to Safari. It defaults to the Safari browser. So I have to, okay, so now I have to go back to stop. Okay, and then we go here. And so this is only 2 minutes long.
This is the awkward meeting dubbed Sofagate. The EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen was surprised to be left without a chair during high-level talks in Ankara. The former German defense minister eventually had to sit on a sofa a little further away from her counterparts and opposite Turkey's foreign minister, who is below her in the protocol.
You understand, they didn't have a chair for her. You can see Charles Michel is the president of the European Council, and Recep Tayyip Erdogan is the president of Turkey. And and this is about protocol and diplomacy, right? Public displays of hierarchy, position, and respect are very important here. So they had chairs set up for the president of the European Council and the president, obviously, of the Republic of Turkey. And this is in Ankara, in the capital of Turkey. And they didn't have a chair for her, for Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission. And supposedly that's never happened before, right? Let's continue with the report.
Order. The spokesman said she didn't dwell on it.
La présidente, clairement, a été surprise.
The president was clearly surprised, and you can see that in the video, but allow me to clarify that however surprised she may have been, she chose to, and I think it was the right approach, she chose to prioritize substance over questions of form or protocol, and that's certainly what European citizens would have expected of her.
But the incident has been met with fierce criticism from EU leaders, including the Italian Prime Minister.
No, non condivido assolutamente le posizioni del Presidente.
I absolutely disagree with President Erdogan's positions. I think it was inappropriate behavior. I was very sorry for the humiliation that the President of the EU Commission, von der Leyen, had to suffer.
Turkey has been quick to react and has summoned the Italian ambassador over the growing row. At a news conference, its foreign minister said the seating arrangement was in line with international protocol.
Her görüşmede, her ziyaret.
In other words, the seating arrangement was designed to meet their demands and suggestions, full stop. We wouldn't need to state this explicitly if there were no accusations against Turkey, but there are statements, even from the highest levels, suggesting this was done by Turkey.
Neither the first female head of the EU executive or President Erdogan have commented on the meeting, but it's hoped the incident won't further dampen diplomatic ties between Brussels and Ankara. Amara Chaudhry, Al Jazeera.
So, Ursula von der Leyen did make a statement in front of the European Parliament in which she did say that she believes that this happened because she was a woman, that it was a snub of Turkey and of the Turkish authorities against her because she is a woman. And Erdogan is one of these authoritarian populist oriented leaders in Turkey, like Donald Trump in the United States and the Law and Justice Party in Poland, and Vladimir Putin, not maybe quite so violent yet, but in Russia. But so would this? She writes here. This is just from yesterday, right, or 2 days ago. Would this have happened if I had worn a suit and tie? Asked Ursula von der Leyen, president of the European Commission, after she was left standing during a summit in Turkey this month. It was an awkward diplomatic moment. Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Union's executive branch, was left standing during a visit to Turkey this month as her colleague, Charles Michel, president of the European Council, and President Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey settled into two chairs. And she says, there have been other cases, obviously, when the president of the European Council and the president of the European Commission were meeting with the leader of another state, and there was always proper protocol arrangements established, right? And so for Turkey to claim that that this was not meant to be a snub is inappropriate because the European Union never had this problem before. So Ms. von der Leyen, the first woman to head the European Commission, weighed in on the situation for the first time on Monday, telling European lawmakers in an unusually frank statement that she had concluded that the blunder had happened because she's a woman. Would this have happened if I had worn a suit and tie, she asked, speaking to the European Parliament on Monday evening. In the pictures of previous meetings, I did not see any shortage of chairs, but then again, I did not see any woman in these pictures either. So when Jean-Claude Juncker and Donald Tusk would meet with the leader of a country, there were always 3 chairs there. I felt hurt and left alone as a woman and as a European, she added, noting that the oversight was a sign of how far we still have to go before women are treated as equals. And video of the meeting, which is held at the Turkish presidential palace, showed Ms. von der Leyen clear surprise as she let out an at the lack of appropriate seating. She quickly settled on a sofa several feet away as Mr. Michel, who ranks equally in the European Union's hierarchy, and Mr. Erdogan sat in front of the European Union and Turkish flags. So Turkey is being criticized as being authoritarian. Turkey has applied to join the European Union and has been a candidate member for since the 1990s, and maybe even going back further. In Turkey, 38% of women who have been married experienced physical or sexual violence during their lifetime, according to 2014 research cited by the United Nations. The country also ranked 133 among 156 countries on a 2021 World Economics Forum report on the global gender gap. And so again, and then you saw Mario Draghi criticizing Turkey for its treatment of her. So again, you see how you as an Italian, as a German, as a French are supposed to be proud of being who you are within Europe as Europe stands up for feminist values and women's equality, liberal values, liberal human rights values, against a Turkey that observers watch as sees becoming increasingly authoritarian, that has more journalists in prison than I think any other country in that part of Europe and Asia, that abuses, well, because of a civil war with the Kurds, but again, comparing authoritarian Turkey with liberal European member nation states. And so you see that process at work here. And you saw Mario Draghi come to her defense when he first also earlier criticized her for the vaccine issues. And then he backtracks and now is standing up and defending her as the leader of Italy, as a frontline actor in European affairs under this pro-European legendary European Central Bank former director, Mario Draghi, now the Prime Minister of Italy. So that's an illustration of this process at work. But let's go to the let me find the notes. Back to the notes for this week because we're already down to 20 minutes left in the class session, and we should have our debate. So okay, so we go here, and then we go screen share to the notes, and here are the notes. So this is emphasized in the next chapter, right? The impact of on European governments in chapter 13, Europeanization of member state institutions. This chapter surveys the scholarly literature, the research on the impact of the European Union and on the member states, and the member states' impact on the institutions of the European Union. So the impact on national governments, a focus is on the impact of the European Union on the autonomy of national governments from the state-centric perspectives. This state-centric perspective is this perspective of the entire textbook, right? It has 4 different variants, and the intergovernmentalist perspective focuses upon the evolution of Europeanization and European integration as the driver behind it, the main driver behind it being these national governments pursuing their national interest. And that national interest is typically assumed to be a national interest that is oriented towards what we call liberalism, economic liberalism, capitalism, in other words, and cooperating as democratic governments in the environment, the world environment in which they exist. So Stanley Hoffman was one of the early writers on this, and of course he was writing during the Cold War. So the perception was that European democracy was challenged or threatened by the Cold War and the division of Europe in half, with the Soviet totalitarian system dominating half of Europe and democratic governments in Western Europe. And it tended to view the European Union, and the best way to explain the European Union's behavior is basically the most complex and developed intergovernmental organization. It's still just, fundamentally, it's an intergovernmental organization. That's the most useful perspective to use, according to Stanley Hoffman, in trying to understand the evolution and development of Europeanization. That it is an outcome of the member states using the European Union institutions to pursue their objectives. Now, of course, this impacts on the member states. It changes the member states. It changed their economies, of course, right, by European integration happening economically in the European Economic Community. But of course, if it affects the economy, it's going to affect politics. It's going to affect government agencies and regulators. But the point is that to try to understand Europeanization and European integration, which are the same thing, Europeanization and European integration is the same, that we should focus upon, beginning by focusing on the national governments and what do the national leaders want. And then the most dominant today perspective on trying to understand European Union from a state-centric perspective is liberal intergovernmentalism, which is basically a restatement of what I just said, but emphasizing more this liberal notion, particularly the fact that the national interest of Germany, Italy, France, the member states of the European Union, is predominantly driven by national economic interests in Germany, national business interests in Italy, national economic business interests in France, wanting to make more money, having more access to more investment and marketing opportunities. And that is the emphasis on the liberal side of the intergovernmentalism. Yeah, they're still pursuing their national interest, but that national interest is really focused upon economic prosperity and development for these advanced developed states that need, prosperous economies to pay for their very expensive and very elaborate social welfare policies, right? I mean, according to one standard figure that's thrown around, it's something like 50%, half of the French gross national product is taken or is controlled by government, controlled by various levels of government in France through taxes and otherwise, and redistributed. That wealth is redistributed to people through pensions, through education policy, through the medical care system. And so you need a prosperous, thriving, developed economy to satisfy people's expectations and needs in these advanced, developed societies. And then there are other perspectives as well. But again, just to highlight here, the emphasis is here upon liberal nation states utilizing the European Union to pursue their liberal national interests, which they tend to understand from a liberal perspective, right? That, Italy is not going to thrive and prosper if it puts in power Mussolini. It already tried that. It doesn't work. The Germans know it doesn't work. And of course, when Germany was reconstructed after the Second World War, within the context of European integration, they created institutions in Germany to make sure, or try to ensure, that liberal constituencies, including business constituencies and autonomy constituencies of the federal regions and the like, would be protected. But again, even in Germany, you have the rise of the Alternative for Germany, a far-right populist party. So, like, going back to what we covered earlier, I asked you, when we compare the experience of Bulgaria and Greece in the textbook, does that indicate that culture or institutions is more important for explaining political behavior? And I think the class decided in that quick vote that culture is more important, obviously, since Greece has been part of the West since World War II, part of NATO. It had difficulty, it had a military coup, but it was always part of the Western alliance, whereas Bulgaria was occupied and controlled by the Soviets, and they still have comparable levels of corruption, and you could even make the point that it's shocking how similar the political behavior patterns we see in these countries are in Greece and Bulgaria, despite their very different institutional histories after the Second World War. So, so even in Germany, you can attempt to make sure that Germany will never again bring to power somebody even begins to remind us of what happened in the 1930s and 40s. But there's limits to what you can guarantee through institutional changes. So okay, and then the third perspective is that political advantage and national economic interests drove European post-war regional cooperation. Again, I mean, that's these are four variants, but they're related to each other, obviously. The claim here is that the more focus here is more on the fact that European states in this third perspective, and here's one of the professors, academics, just to give you a name, right? It's not really necessary to remember it, but that the need to develop these states to pay for their welfare systems, to pay for their welfare state policies within the context of, as I said, the Cold War, where the concern was, that, keep in mind, right after World War II, liberalism politically and economically didn't look very good, right? I mean, capitalism gave us the Great Depression, and democratic elections were the means by which Adolf Hitler came to power in 1933 in Germany. He came to power through democratic election. Now, of course, after he came to power, he was put in office as prime minister or chancellor of Germany. He then abolished elections, but he came to power through elections. So communism appeared to be an alternative model. Of course, the communists were saying, yes, we are the alternative model. Our model, we need, this is the future of the world. And of course, that might sound like it's history lesson, but as I'm speaking, of course, right now, we all know that's what the Chinese are arguing, right? That they have controlled the pandemic, that they didn't elect someone like Donald Trump as president. They didn't, the leader of the country. So we still have this ideological competition underway with the Chinese offering an alternative model when in a world where there's intensifying and more frequent crises due to globalization, including not just the pandemic, but anthropogenic climate change. But you can make the point that the pandemic is a result of globalization, right? With the economic development of China and human beings becoming more and more encroaching on wildlife and territories where wild nature, animals and plants are more pressed by the demands by humans to develop that area, exploit those resources, that there's more and more. I mean, look, think how many pandemics we've had. This is just the latest one, but I can just name them off the top of my head. The HIV AIDS epidemic that began 40 years ago, the H1N1 scare, the SARS and MERS epidemics, Ebola, Zika, West Nile virus. This is common. It's just this is the worst one. This COVID-19 pandemic. And with people traveling, moving across borders, climate change happening, so mosquitoes and animal habitation ranges are changing. Zika, for example, the Zika virus spreads by mosquitoes. So who's best configured as an actor in the international system to deal with these crises? And the Chinese are saying our system is the best. And this dealing with the pandemic is pretty strong evidence that they don't have necessarily are going to agree that the Western model is necessarily the model that the world should strive to emulate, and that's what they are saying, right? And of course, considering the challenges that other Asian countries. I mean, look, my God, look what's going on in India now, right? There's always this comparison with China and India since the end of the British Empire and the rise of the Chinese Communist Party. And look at this horror unfolding in India. And the Chinese are saying, see? And pointing to the rest of the world and saying, our model is the best model. And it's not just me making these points. Joe Biden, President of the United States, in his speech to the US Congress last night, 4 times referenced China, that we are in a competition with China, that liberal democracy has to demonstrate that it can deal with these challenges in competition with the Chinese model. So this is not just a quaint little historical comparison. This is important today. And you can make that point that the European Union is a model that the other developed countries with the European countries need to work more closely together to deal with these challenges the way the European advanced countries have been working more closely together since the 1950s. And they already are talking about, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, in which South Korea belongs, but also the United States and Canada and Japan, to cooperate more closely again, the European Union as a model for the rest of the world, for at least for the developed world, and appealing to other countries that work more closely with this model rather than the Chinese model. And then the fourth perspective is rational choice institutionalism. Before I go on, right? Just so you know, right? What is the Joe Biden and Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary of the United States, calling for? The OECD should meet and establish a base rate for corporation taxation, for taxing corporations, multinational businesses and corporations, so they cannot run around and move around to get the lowest taxation rate. The way we talked about how Ireland, for example, has always had really low corporate taxation rates, that there needs to be put a limit on that so that there is stable revenue, budget revenue coming into these countries. They know corporations are not going to be able to go to the lower taxation haven in a race to the bottom. So again, generating memories of what the Europeans have been attempting to do, that the European Union is the most advanced model of this effort. And rational choice institutionalism. Okay, so on that, that basically emphasizes that the European Union is a way by which to emphasize economic efficiency and economic material benefits. Okay, yeah. Whenever you see that term rational choice, the focus is on economic determinist focus on integration. So let's go now to our debate topic, and our debate topic is. Let me go to the lesson plan, stop, pause, and open up the lesson plan. And the lesson plan is here. No, that's not it. Let me, once again, stop share. And let me open up the screen. So where is the lesson plan? Here it is. Okay, go here. And okay, it's not. Okay, here it is. So here is the lesson plan. So to South Koreans, Europeanization is the most advanced globalization. To conclude what we're already just covering, to South Koreans, Europeanization is the most advanced globalization. So we can go to the screen and stop share, and let me divide you into 2 groups. And let's say the middle person, no, because, well, yeah, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, the middle person, the second person in each group, the second person in each group is the leader of the group. So that is In Hyuk Chon and Park Subin are the 2 leaders. Come up with a position of your group, pro or con, on the debate topic. Okay, so please join the groups. Please join the groups, and you see that that is the those are the groups there, and so you can see groups In Hyuk Chon and Park Subin is the leader of the second group. Come up with a position, pro or con or neutral cannot decide, on whether or not Europeanization is the most advanced globalization. And if I don't see Park Subin get on in the next 15 seconds, then I'm going to make one of the other members leader of the group. And let me do that. And Park Subin is still not joined. So Sok Yoon is heads, and it is heads. So Sok Ju Yoon, you are the leader of the group. You are the leader of this group, room 2. So come up with a position, pro or con, your group's position on whether or not Europeanization is the most advanced globalization. And I will ask you to speak in 2 minutes.
그런 면에서 유로피언 유니언이 이제 이런 국가들 같은 경우에는 되게 그냥 경제적으로만 이렇게 협력을 하지.
Well, it looks like everybody's done. People have left the room, so they must be ready to go. So who's going to speak first? And let me, heads is group room 1, and it is tails. So Sok Ju Yoon, please, what did your group decide? Sok Ju Yoon.
Okay, do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we stand at the middle side, and first of all, we can see pro on this topic as because of the reason that they achieved the political integration compared to like ASEAN had achieved the economic integration only. And second, we can see this topic as con because they have really low capacity on the risk management side, such as the Africa and Middle East cases. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. You say economically they've integrated, politically they haven't. Yeah, I mean, they claim to be advocating human rights, and they're more harsh. They rhetorically they're more willing to criticize Israel, but they don't do anything to stop Israel from abusing the Palestinians because they're so committed to the United States, right? They are so. I mean, the prevailing view among the European elite is that they are dependent upon the United States to make this work, and so there's a limited extent to which they're willing to oppose the United States when the United States does bad things. So they sent thousands of soldiers to Afghanistan, and which they shouldn't have done. I mean, that was a disaster, but it was known to be a disaster for years, but they did it anyway because the Americans wanted them there. And now the Americans are leaving, and they're going to have to leave too. But I think NATO's got 8,000 troops there in Afghanistan. So, okay, yeah, that's always been the big challenge, that they're so closely allied to the United States, their rhetoric about human rights doesn't always match the behavior of NATO under American leadership, which can be criticized. And okay, room 1. So In Hyuk Chun, what did your group come up with?
Yes, we are also pro for that subject because in globalized world, the cooperation with other country is the important for the develop their country themselves. And we think the Europeanization is the model system for the cooperation with other country. like for example, that Eurozone is the can play a role that kind of for the exchange, like a economic. Sorry, the economic for the economic change. The Eurozone is the best. Eurozone is the kind of good.
Okay.
Thing. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, somebody might say that globalization only happens because the Americans provide leadership. That's the standard view of, not the only view, but that's the prevailing view in Washington and among American professors, is that globalization and European integration as part of globalization happens because of American benign hegemony overcoming the security dilemma with its capitalist economic system and its democratic political system, that it's a benign hegemon. You might have heard that in your international relations theory classes, in neo-realist and neoliberal perspectives. So, okay. All right, so let's go then to a vote on terms of who won the debate. And we go here to the survey, and let's see if we can do this here. And we go to vote. And so please vote on whether or not, oh, you already did vote. Okay, so you have 1 minute if you haven't voted. Pro seems to be far in advance. So I'll give you another a few seconds to vote if you haven't, but that's where we stand. So, okay, does anybody have any questions before we sign off? Your midterms, of course, are due tomorrow morning for me to put a grade on them. And that's all for today, okay? So bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.